Beat the Bookie is back. Good evening and welcome into another year of twists and turns, ups and downs, overs and unders, covers and bad beats. Money thrown around, and all we can do is take our best guesses for it, but who knows what will actually end up happening. I bet your money wasn't on Bill Belichick's girlfriend Jordan Hudson talking to the first-year North Carolina head coach on the field during a TCU demolition of UNC on Monday. My name is Nico Horning, and I'm extremely excited to place some college football bets for our first show of the season, so let's get after it. Each week, a different analyst gets $100 to throw around and place that however they'd like. Now, why should you trust me? Everyone here at CitrusTV knows I'm notorious for asking for money and Venmos from them to compete in my overpriced fantasy leagues. They're really not overpriced. It's an investment. As long as you're also eager to win, excited to learn from your losses, and be careful but still have fun with your sports money, join me on the adventure to the top of the leaderboard amongst our analysts. And speaking of some of those who refuse to join my leagues, let's check out how the spring semester ended up. All right, we get some of the graduates from the class of 2025 on here. Skylar Wilkes with a humongous win on Beat the Bookie in the spring, the look-alike of Scotty Scheffler. Total profits from the spring semester, $257. The biggest loss went to Shrikar, Terrence, and Chris with a $79 loss. They did a little UFC show there on that loss. All right, we go into our games of the week here. That's how we start off this show every time, a few games of the week. And our first one includes number 11 Illinois and Duke. Both teams of the week one cakewalk, Illinois against Western Illinois and Duke against Elon. This will be the first true test for the highly ranked Fighting Illini, who have won 5 straight games on the road in Durham. And you know what? It's going to be one on the ground. Duke let Elon run for over 160 yards and a couple touchdowns. Last year, the Blue Devils gave up about 150 rushing yards per game. Expect Illinois to take advantage of those numbers. The Illini rumbled for 210 yards, 3 scores, and averaged over 5 yards a carry last week. If that keeps up, Illinois covers by a field goal and earns the right to be a top 15 football team in the nation. I got Illinois covering for $10. Over in Ames, who doesn't love a Cy-Hawk rivalry in the second week of the season? Because both schools belong to different conferences, Iowa State and Iowa bring excitement to Iowans in September. The Cyclones come in as the host and the 16th ranked team in the country after moving up 6 spots with a blowout victory over South Dakota and a win over Kansas State in Dublin. The Hawkeyes beat UAlbany 34-7. But this is where things get a little weird. The home team hasn't prevailed since 2018. Iowa State hasn't emerged victorious on home turf in 14 years. But despite the inability to defend its own house, Iowa State has won 2 of the last 3 matchups, including last year's game-winning 54-yard field goal. All signals point me to pick the road team for this game, but a guy by the name of Rocco Becht has me feeling confident that the home squad can break the skid. The Iowa State QB is set to start for the 3rd time in this rivalry, and that's the type of experience one needs to win a game as big as this one. A game surrounded by cornfields. I'm throwing $10 on Becht and the Cyclones, putting a storm on the Hawkeyes and covering by 2.5. Either way, expect another dogfight of the game between the rivals. All right, to our 3rd game of the week. 15th ranked Michigan and 18th ranked Oklahoma. This happens to be the only matchup this weekend with 2 ranked squads going at it. The Sooners took a week 1 home victory over Illinois State by 32 points, and the Wolverines came out of Ann Arbor doubling up New Mexico. OU transfer quarterback John Mateer threw for almost 400 yards and completed 81% of his passes for 3 touchdowns and a pick. The former Washington State signal caller was Cam Ward's backup at Wazoo in 2023 before he ended up at Miami. Mateer threw for over 3,000 yards last year in what was somewhat of a cupcake schedule for WSU in the collapse of the Pac-12. But now with Mateer at Oklahoma, he's got a lot to prove. Not only a more difficult schedule, but that he can sustain accuracy and live up to potential in these big games. What a better way to start that than against Michigan. I expect him to continue his hot arm from this past weekend and show out once again in front of the home crowd in Norman. Give me Oklahoma covering by 5.5 against Michigan for $10. Now let's check what our producers think against me here in the games of the week. And what a terrible photo choice they chose of me, first of all. Some poker chips there of me napping. I don't know. Anyway, our producers agree on the Oklahoma win that the Sooners will cover by 5.5, and then they differ from the final two picks. They have Duke covering by 2.5 and Iowa covering by 2.5 and taking another road win there instead of Iowa State defending once more. All right, now it's time for the real moneymakers. The talk of the college football world last weekend started with how poorly the Texas Longhorns offense played against the world-famous Ohio State Buckeyes, according to Gus Johnson. Arch Manning, he was overarched, as beautifully spoken by Reese Davis in the start of Lee Corso's final ESPN College Game Day show. It took until the back half of the fourth quarter for Manning and the Longhorns to find the end zone at Ohio Stadium. Yes, they only lost by a possession, but Manning was ineffective in the passing game for the majority of the day. Now Texas plays at home for the first time this season and welcomes San Jose State. In reality, this should be a high-scoring rout for the Longhorns over the Spartans, but nothing from what I saw last weekend believes me that there will be 52 points or more scored in this game unless Texas can replicate that last drive against Ohio State time and time again. I wouldn't be shocked, but I don't see it happening in week 2. Give me $15 on the under for Texas and San Jose State. Another 51.5 point total features number 8 Clemson and Troy. The Tigers dropped a tight home matchup to number 3 LSU to begin the season. Cade Klubnik was uncomfortable most of the game in the pocket, and boy, that running game was a tough sight for Clemson. Just 31 yards on the ground on 20 carries. I fully see Dabo Swinney getting his guys to rebound against a lighter opponent and pounce over Troy from the beginning, resulting in the over. I'm adding $10 on the over of this one between Clemson and Troy. All right, I'm a West Coast guy. Let's give the West Coast some love here in my next couple of picks. Stanford goes at it with BYU in Utah this weekend. BYU defeated Portland State 69-0, and Stanford dropped its first game 23-20 at Hawaii. The Cardinals present a tougher test than Portland State, but still a relatively bad ACC team. Stanford lost several players to the portal after Troy Taylor was fired, so BYU should get another win this weekend against Stanford. But 18.5 points, as far as the favorites goes, just a little high in my opinion. Sophomore running back Micah Ford can keep Stanford in the game if he can build on what he did in Honolulu. Ford ran for 115 yards and a touchdown. Put him in the end zone twice against BYU, and I can see this matchup being a bit closer than what Vegas thinks. I'll throw $10 towards Stanford covering BYU. Staying out west, Washington State welcomes San Diego State late on Saturday. The Cougs barely edged out Idaho while SDSU pounced on Stony Brook 42-0. I'm putting $10 that San Diego State beats Washington State straight up, and here's why. Wazoo has to fix that poor offensive showing against Idaho, in which the Cougs came out with a game-winning field goal. SDSU also played a couple days earlier than WSU with a Thursday game rather than Saturday. This game came out to be a 3-point win for Washington State last year, but I don't see the Cougars offense fixing things in time in front of their home faithful in Pullman. Give me an Aztecs victory. All right, enough college football for your betting fix this weekend. Let's jump to the baseball diamond, my favorite sport, where it feels like we're out of that weird rut of the sports season, you know, towards the end of July and especially into August, just some random regular season MLB games going on. But now they matter because it's September and the standings start to mean something. Boy, are there some close races. The Blue Jays lead the Yankees and the Red Sox by 2.5 games in the AL East. The Dodgers have a 2.5 game edge over the Padres in the NL West. Not to mention the AL wildcard race isn't finished, with the Rangers trailing the Mariners for that final spot by a game and a half. What I want to hone in on is the NL wildcard race. And I would have said a couple weeks ago that this race is about to be done and the Mets can comfortably win that third and final spot in the wildcard, but not so fast. Yes, they still have a 5-game cushion over the Reds and the Giants. However, the water at McCovey Cove is warming up and settling down. Those San Francisco Giants have won 9 of their last 10 games, and they're not done yet. If you want a reasonable long shot to put your money towards, I'm placing $15 on the Giants clinching a wildcard spot. Why? Well, let's talk about the schedules. I think that could be the #1 factor here. The Giants' remaining games include the bad Rockies, the mediocre Cardinals and D-backs, and yes, 7 tough games against the Dodgers. The Mets, on the other hand, have the Tigers, Reds, Phillies, Rangers, Padres, and Cubs left. That's no easy quest. And yes, there's some Nationals and Marlins, fairly easy games mixed in there. But boy, it's going to be time for New York to show out and show the MLB world what it has to take to close the season, because the Giants, they're going to be going to be those great whites in the Bay, looking to pounce, especially if they can take a few from the Dodgers. If they lose all 7 of the Dodgers, there's no shot. But they got to take a few from LA because the rest of their schedule is fairly manageable. So again, $15 on the Giants making the NL wild card at plus 1,700. All right, so I got the Giants winning the NL wild card. Yes, it's a long shot, but put your money there because it can happen. Now let's check out some futures bets that took place from last semester that some are finished, but some are still ongoing as well, including our sports director, Adam Cohen, who has the Mets winning the NL East, so we're in a little bit of a dogfight there for the National League East, but he did lose a couple of other bets from last semester as well. The Avalanche did not end up winning the Stanley Cup. Also, the Lakers did not win the NBA championship. That was the Oklahoma City Thunder, so he lost about $30 with those 2 bets. Ian Nicholas is still with an active bet. Jeremiah Smith as the Heisman winner. However, a couple of drops against Texas, 6 receptions for 43 yards for Jeremiah Smith, still in that Heisman conversation. And then for Austin Barrick, he has the Red Sox winning the American League East. They trail the Blue Jays by 3.5 games. And for Adam Cohen's Mets, they trail the Phillies by 6 games as well. All right, for the real moneymaker, let's wrap things up tonight with a parlay. We talked about San Jose State and Texas scoring off a bit earlier. I took the under of that game after Arch Manning threw for just 170 yards against Ohio State, but that even sounds better than what it looked like. Guess what? I'm also telling you to take San Jose State covering the 36.5 against Texas. I think the Longhorns will respond in a big way, but don't get me thinking that this offense will just come out of nowhere for Texas. Pair that with another big underdog covering against number 2 Penn State. That would be FIU. The Nittany Lions defeated Nevada by 35 in week 1. Now the odds are 41.5 against FIU, which is about right, but I just don't see Drew Aller playing a perfect game to lead to that much of an amountment over FIU. So give me the Panthers covering in this one, and if those 2 shake out to the way I think they will, it comes down to hotty toddy. I have 20th ranked Ole Miss covering the 10.5 against Kentucky on the road. The Rebels demolished Georgia State 63-7 in week 1, and Lane Kiffin will have his squad ready to go after losing to Kentucky a year ago. So San Jose State covers against Texas, FIU covers against Penn State, and Ole Miss, to round it out, covers against Kentucky with a 2-score win. $15 on this equates to more than $95 on a 3-leg parlay to begin the year. So to recap the picks that we've already gone over, Oklahoma covering against Michigan, Illinois by a field goal against Duke, Iowa State by 3, breaking that road win streak in that series against Iowa. And then some over-unders, San Jose State and Texas. Again, we talked about it all night long, going with the under there. And then Clemson and Troy putting the over there with Cade Klubnik. Stanford will cover against BYU. And then money line, San Diego State against Washington State. SDSU takes the win there in Pullman. And again, the long shot. If you want something that has some reason behind it, the San Francisco Giants making the NL wildcard here in the last month of the MLB season. And then again, that parlay that we just went over. All right, that just about does it here tonight for this busy slate of college football coming up this weekend. So excited that the season is finally here. Thanks to our producers, Adam Hipsky, Griffin Bloomstein, putting together everything behind the scenes tonight. I'm Nico Horning, wishing you happy betting, and we hope we can help you beat the bookie.